All right, welcome to the Rebel Walk Recruiting Show. I am your host, Stephen Willis, and along with me is Leanne Herring. We're going to talk a little bit about Ole Miss football today, and specifically a couple of 2023s. We have the cookout coming up shortly. Some unofficial visitors you might have heard of are in the news. But Leanne, how you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. Yeah, there's a lot of exciting news coming up. And like I said, the last couple shows we've been talking about defense, but now we're going to see a big switch to the offense. And like you said, as we get closer to the picnic and all that kind of stuff, you're going to be seeing a lot of 3 and 4 and 5 star kids that are going to be in the circuit of who we're going to be talking about. And one kid in particular that's going to be a lot, you're going to hear a lot of, that's already come from an unofficial and has camped with us this past June is Miles McVay. He's a 2023 four-star offensive tackle out of East St. Louis. And he's the 118th overall national prospect in the class of 2023.
Yeah, it looks like a fantastic player. I think your audio cut out real quick. Can you just do the beginning of that spiel again?
Yeah, let's talk a little. Like I said, one name that we're going to hear a lot more about is an offensive tackle out of East St. Louis, Illinois. He's a four-star, Miles McVay. He's the overall 118th player in the 2023 recruiting class. He's the number 10 OT in the country for 2023, and he's the number one player in the state of Illinois. He's sitting right now with 20 offers. He camped with us back in June during the D-line and offensive lineman camp, and the coaches were really high and really impressed with him and what they saw in camp. And like I said, I think he's going to be a great addition, and we're gonna be seeing a lot more and hearing a lot more about Miles McVay in the upcoming months as we get closer, like you said, to the picnic and come August. I wouldn't be surprised if he's about to drop his top 12 soon. I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss is in the mix if we keep pushing hard for this kid.
Yeah, if you look at the kid's huddle ranking, or his huddle page, which is in the description below, you can see that he has a video from the Ole Miss camp in June, from the 7-on-7 camp, where he performed the offensive line, defensive line version of that camp. Good player. He's kind of a little bit of a mauler, but you can definitely see there's a little bit of beef, and there's definitely a size aspect to the offensive lineman that they are recruiting this year.
Exactly. And like I said, that's one of the key things we've been talking about defense, but also on the offensive line, that's going to be key. Whether he plays tackle or we train, well, I mean, he's primarily played tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if think is an essential when it comes to having a strong offensive line, especially when you could potentially be protecting Arch Manning in the 2023 class at your QB. You want a kid like Miles McVay who knows how to tailor not just his assignments but his blocking. Like I said, he's really good when you watch him in his film at understanding zone blocking and great on pass protection, like I said. And he's a key finisher. His size is going to be something, like I said, that's going to be tremendous impact onto that offensive line at Ole Miss if we can get him. And it's going to be really hard for a defensive end to get past this kid because, like I said, he's really good at finishing his blocks and he's really good at sealing the edge. And he knows he has this football IQ and this field awareness that I think is very, very key at this level. And like I said, he's a 2023, so what we've seen from him so far, he still has another year to really sink in high school ball. So I think that we're going to see even a lot more. Like I said, this kid's already a four-star, one of the top players. We've already seen him in person. He's already kind of got a feel. He's building good relationships. he said that one thing he really enjoyed about his visit, when he came to Oxford, was how the coaches were very familiar with what he runs at home. So when you already have that familiar, you know, level with him and how he fits into the Ole Miss system, like I said, when you look at his film and you see what he could develop into at an OT position, it's a very strong and very fresh sense of fresh air when you have a kid like that with that kind of size and what he can bring to the table on that offensive line.
Yeah, I'm very excited about him, and I'm also very excited about the next guy we're going to talk about. I know we made you wait about 6 minutes into this show, everybody, but thanks for sticking around. But do want to talk a little bit about Arch Manning, as the media is just all about this kid, and really his recruitment is following what his uncle Eli was like. It was Texas, it was Virginia, all of this all over the place. But at the end of the day, it ended up Ole Miss with Eli. I don't know where Arch is going to end up as well. But, I mean, you have to talk about Arch. He's a five-star quarterback from the class of 2023. Super quick release. He's already 6'4". I mean, the kid has a ton of upside and is a smooth player.
Exactly. Exactly. And like you said, aside if he wasn't a Manning, he's one of those kids that he produces as advertised. Like, whether he's a Manning or not, this kid already in his freshman and sophomore year, starting varsity at Newman in Louisiana, he has proved to be an exceptional player. Right now, he sits on 12 offers, like you said. He's already 6'4", 208, a five-star kid. He's the number 2 overall national player in the 2023 class. Of course, the number 1 QB in his class, and no surprise, the number 1 prospect in 2023 coming out of the state of Louisiana. And like I said, you said it. He's a great pro style passer, and what I really like about him, which is of course with his pedigree, being around his family and whatnot, is he's got this great ability to scramble, and he's an off the cuff playmaker. And with the offense that we run in Ole Miss with Levy and Kiffin, we need those type of playmakers, and he's very secure in that thing. Like, he can think off the cuff. He's very comfortable in that. He throws on the move, and he's another smooth operator. He's really good at being quick and smooth and consistent in his delivery. He stays on top of the ball exceptionally well already, just for being a sophomore heading into his junior year. And what I really like about this kid, obviously, is that he really, really thrives if you look at his film in the short to intermediate passes. And what I like about that is that means that in clutch positions, when you're trying to, convert in, third and fourth downs or in that red zone, he's able to handle the pressure and get off that ball really, really well already, because he's extremely athletic and he likes to scramble. So like I said, he's a versatile player already at this level. And like I said, he is as advertised. And it's no surprise that, so many colleges are looking after, because like I said, he's so versatile. And if he wasn't a Manning and he was just a kid that was a 5-star, he's already producing, and he's extremely accurate. Like I said, he's another ace in the hole. That it's going to be interesting. Like you said, his recruitment is very similar to his uncle Eli, because no one really knows where he's going. And the schools that you want to talk about realistically outside of Ole Miss, obviously Ole Miss is going to be in the conversation. But right now, what I'm hearing, Clemson and Texas are the hot topics. And very high on his recruitment. And I wouldn't be surprised that LSU and even Bama and possibly even Georgia are going to be the dark horses come the fall, and even late right here in the start, as we have a little break in between, the dead period before the next period, dead period begins in August, that, more schools will be pushing for Arch Manning. Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah, it's a heck of a player. Just realize, everybody listen to this, that the media are going to run with any nugget of information as it is absolute fact. We're going to talk about that in just a second with expansion as well. But when it comes down to the ones that are making the most noise are where the national narrative is going to go, because honestly, they don't expect him to go to Ole Miss. That is not newsworthy. They want newsworthy. They want sizzle. They want him at Texas. They want him at Clemson.
Exactly. And we kind of think of it, and everyone's been talking about, well, what his advice has Eli given, what Peyton and everybody and his grandfather have given, and it's pretty simple, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. Enjoy your high school recruitment, and I think that's what Arch Manning is doing. He's being realistic. He's already he spent a couple days in Texas. He camped obviously at Texas on the June, and then he also spent some time at SMU, and he also spent some time camping at Clemson. And I think it's good for him to be able to feel the waters. Like I said, we're going to have to. I think people automatically assume that, just like in the case of in-state players, that you almost expect them to come to Ole Miss, like you would expect Arch to come to Ole Miss because he's a Manning. But on the contrary, I feel like if we're on the Ole Miss recruitment staff, we're going to have to go even twice as hard for him because he knows this, because it's a part of his blood, it's a part of his genes. He's grown up about that. So you can't recruit the kid, on assumptions. I think you almost have to go harder to try to get him in your graces and try to, have a stronger pitch than Clemson and Texas would, because, it's so familiar to him.
Yeah, honestly, this is just my opinion, but I can't imagine a person in the age of name, image, and likeness making more money at Ole Miss than somebody with the last name Manning.
Exactly. And I've been talking to a few folks about that. It's like, we've been talking about that, during with SEC Media Week. We already see, Bryce Young in Alabama. I'm a millionaire practically, and he hasn't even stepped foot on the field this thing. And the same thing would be for a kid like Arch Manning. And, I couldn't talk about Arch Manning without talking about, consulting our Rebel Walk QB guru, David Walker, about Arch. And he says he's probably one of the most talked about and probably one of the most interesting high school quarterbacks that's not only come out of the state of Louisiana, but in this class for a long time. It's very hard, as much as you want to pick his flaws when you look at him. David was talking about is that he's grown up in the game. He's got exceptional athleticism. He's got tremendous touch, arm strength. It's very hard to find a flaw in this kid, as much as you want to, because he's just at that level already, which makes him so much more enticing. But like you said, before he even steps foot on campus, if he were to choose Ole Miss, like you said, in the age now of name, image, and likeness, he would probably, surpass some of these kids that have been playing already, for 2 years at Ole Miss, just because of his name recognition.
Absolutely. And before we get out of here today, I want to talk a little bit about the expansion situation with Texas and Oklahoma, looking at the SEC, because of course they are. And don't let anybody fool themselves. Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC is a major boon. And no, it's not going to cause each program to struggle. They may not go undefeated. They might not compete for the playoffs, but most teams other than Alabama do not. The problem with Texas, the reason this helps Texas and Oklahoma, is the SEC is starting to get a foothold in Texas. And it started with Texas A&M, and slowly over time, it grew and it grew and it grew. Now, Texas wants to kind of can't beat them, join them type thing and take a little bit of that sting away. But also for the SEC, there's a possibility of a rebranded Longhorn Network to become the SEC West channel, to go with the SEC East channel with an overarching streaming service over the top. There's a lot of balls in play right here. There's a lot of stuff that could happen, and this move would be seismic in college football and completely change the power balance for teams really across the country.
Exactly. Like you said, you can see it from all different angles, and you gave some really good points right now. If you look at it from just a pure business, which we have to remember, as much as we want to keep the amateur tradition of college football, it is still very much a multi-billion-dollar business. So each college has to run that. There has to be like that. And like you said, you mentioned the idea of the Longhorn Network becoming the SEC West Network. There's all these potential. So when you look at two powerhouses that constantly, even though Texas hasn't quite been there, Texas has the financial backing, the alumni, those things too, even if they were to come right now, would still bring a lot of revenue and bring a lot of things, like you said, because in the state of Texas where high school football is as big as it is, imagine if you had Texas A&M, Texas, in the SEC, the two powerhouses in the state of Texas. And that would and as far as recruiting goes, now, I think when Sark took over, and he saw the potential, because had it not been Sark, had it been somebody else, I don't know if we would have been having this, and that Texas would be ready to entertain that conversation, or with Oklahoma. And I think now the fact that Sark, having been, his background in the SEC coming from Alabama, that this would be a smart move. So like I said, I can see it from a lot. Am I 100% fan of this? Do I want Texas and OU both to be in the SEC? I'm not a fan of both teams being in the SEC for a lot of different reasons and whatnot. But like I said, if you look at it from a business and financial, point, I can see exactly. They were talking about, and I believe you retweeted it, about how Texas and Oklahoma were not present in the Big 12 conference call that was
Yes.
going on. I almost think too could, not to be sound a little bit of a conspiracy theorist in this regard, but could this possibly be a power play with Texas and Oklahoma? Your two big, if you really look at it, these are your two biggest powerhouses that are the Big 12. These are the guys that call the shots. These are the guys who are competing, and mostly Oklahoma, if we see it. So could this be a power play to try to reorganize and get more opportunity for the Big 12? I've also looked at it that way. We see it with coaching, and we see it in coaching, and we even see it with recruiting all the time. You see these 4 and 5 star kids who are solely committed to powerhouse programs like Texas. We've seen a couple of kids, in the last 24 hours that are 4 and 5 star players decommit from Texas, with this announcement. So, there's, like you said, there's a lot of balls in play in here and things about it. In the long haul, I think that I would like to see maybe one of these teams come into the conference. I don't know if having Texas and Oklahoma and completely leaving the Big 12 kind of, in between with not one of those in play would be the smartest choice. And I look at it also from, Oklahoma and Texas coming in. They have to realize, you talk to a lot of Oklahoma fans. Well, they win year in and out. They compete for national titles. But if you think about it, when you're competing in the SEC, especially in the SEC West, that's a tough schedule, especially for Oklahoma. I don't think that they would go, remain a 1-loss, 2-loss team, to be quite honest. So there's a lot to think about when, factors in play. But from a
Yeah.
business standpoint, I mean, it's a conversation that was going to be had eventually. And I think because Sark is now at Texas, it makes that conversation and opens a lot more doors because of the connections with Sark to the SEC.
Yeah, and also with Sark, with the Pete Carroll view of recruiting around the country that they did at Alabama, they did at USC, Lane Kiffin does it at Ole Miss. It's that Pete Carroll system of recruiting, and he's kind of took that along. So it's going to open up some opportunities in Texas. It's not going to be a situation where you recruit 100 miles from Austin and you have a team that can play with anybody. You're going to sign 10, 15 kids from Texas, but there's going to be 10 players you're going to try and get from out of state.
Exactly, and like you said, what people don't realize by the state of Texas, like a lot of the kids that we've talked about, a lot of them just are just in the Houston area alone. The Houston area of Texas is one of the most saturated, talented players of kids that from all these programs, and there's been a big movement that Texas A&M really pushed for, is trying to keep these in-state Texas kids, and Texas is kind of feeling that because a lot of their hard commits have been, eyeing Texas A&M now for that opportunity to still stay close to mama, but still be a part of the SEC. And I think, like I said, that conversation has slowly been making them realizing, hey, this is a conversation that we might, like you said, if we're not going to beat them, we're going to join them. And I think that's what Sark's realizing with recruiting, because these kids are all flocking to A&M, and if they're not flocking to A&M, they're going to go play somewhere in the SEC, whether it's at Alabama, South Carolina, even Missouri. So because Texas is so saturated with this talent.
Yeah, and what people need to know, what our fans need to realize, I think this is good for the SEC and it would be good for Ole Miss. But one, there's not been a denial from anybody, and all the actions are proving this true at this moment. Secondly, sources are going to come out with all different stuff, anything coming out. Pay attention to what's actually happened. It's going to take some time. And three, Texas A&M and Missouri are going to saber rattle because they have to for their base. But at the end of the day, they're going to be on board for this as well.
Yeah, I think exactly like you said, the media is going to spin it. If everyone thinks that this deal is going to be done tomorrow, I had some people close say, "Oh, it's a done deal." I said, "No, no, no, no. This is not a done deal. It's going to take some time." And like you said, Mizzou and especially Texas A&M, I think that they might put up a fight and a little bit of hesitation, especially Texas A&M, given the history, the long tradition history between the rivalries of Texas and Texas A&M. When once they decided to leave, the Big 12 and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at it at the bigger picture, and that's really what they're looking at, the bigger picture, not just, about the football aspect, but more importantly, the business aspect. Because if you can bring another powerhouse like Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC, I mean, that's a power conference. We're talking about this a little bit, in the fall and a little bit in December about what about these power conferences, just shrinking down all the mini conferences and let's just create these superpowers. Well, if Texas and Oklahoma come to the SEC, we're about to see the first example of a super conference right here.
Yeah, and just everybody also needs to remember we're not talking about a 14 playoff at this point. We're talking about a 12-team
Exactly.
playoff, which might
Playoff.
take 4 teams from the SEC. So if you need to only finish first or second to get into the tournament, all of a sudden a super conference makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And like you said, it just makes a lot of sense from a different aspect, in joining forces because, the Big 12 right now is just, it hasn't really found its identity. And Texas is trying, and Sark is trying to rebuild at Texas, and, OU is trying to figure it out. So, like you said, joining forces might not be a bad idea, not just on a business front, but also for college football and uniting these fan bases.
Yeah. All right, Leanne, thank you very much for the show tonight. We're going to come back and do it again next week. If you have you're more interested about expansion, tune into the podcast tomorrow. By the way, I did a ton of graphic work for the podcast. I'm very proud of it. Hope you can tune in and check that out as well. But for Leanne, I'm Stephen Willis. Hotty toddy.
Hotty toddy.